Continuing on the same line, will the FTAs help in deferring this slide of the rupee against the dollar? As I would think that we would be channelizing our exports more towards the FTA countries. Will that help us in any way?
I don't think so, because to a large extent what we export goes towards meeting our energy needs. So the dollar earned from that just goes to meet the demand for dollars to import our oil. However, the long-term fall of the rupee will be reduced, and reduced significantly, as a more important change is happening in the Indian landscape, which is shift towards EV vehicles. Because as we shift more and more towards them, the requirement of fuel at the pumps will keep reducing. So that hump technically we will cross sometime in 2042 or 2044. So post that, the fall of the rupee will not be that much, as we may ultimately be a net dollar accretor nation, unless of course geopolitically things drastically change in the next 15 years.
Will accelerating production within India, like China has been the engine of the world for manufacturing? I understand that a lot of companies are interested in setting up units, and iPhone has specially opened a unit in Chennai, if I'm not wrong. And will that help in again the slide of the dollar versus the rupee, side of the rupee versus the dollar?
Well, this China plus one story has been flopped to death. It has not happened the way it was supposed to happen, simply because China is no fool. Once they realized that this was happening, they immediately subsidized Southeast Asian countries like Vietnam, Philippines, Cambodia, etc., where they subsidized those nations to help relocate a lot of Chinese companies into these countries, thereby preempting their relocation to India. And this was a game which none of the analysts initially caught on to. Now, of course, everybody knows that it's the case. So it's a missed opportunity. But yes, if we were expecting $100 worth of business to come our way from China, well, I think we'll end up with 25 of that, which is not bad.
But will it be counterpoised by our defense production and defense exports? This loss of manufacturing alone, because I understand we are having some of the best missiles and other things which are very many countries are interested in. Will that be offsetting that?
It will, if we keep exporting at a faster and larger space. But again, the existing entrenched players, which is mostly the American-based companies, they use the geopolitical power of the entire US government in furthering their interests. So if a small nation which is planning to buy, let us say, our Akash missiles or our one of the Mk1 aircraft, and if somebody from the US were to tell them, okay, if you go to India and buy those stuff, we will not give you oil, or we will not give you medicines, or anything for that matter, which they can use to blackmail that country. These kind of things we have to expect, because they have been doing this for 150 years, where under the flag, companies are given protection to spread, whereas India and many countries in the southeast don't do that. So this kind of shakedown, when change happens, we should be strong enough to weather it and stand up to it.
So, would I be incorrect in saying that this development program, which has been initiated by the new government, is it a falsetto, or is it something between hype and truth.
Okay, the government has done everything in good faith, but then if today they are claiming some success, obviously it's high. Because like I told you, if we were expecting 100, we may ultimately end up with 25, 30, and we are currently possibly at 10 or 15. So that's the extent of production shift in China plus one. Whether the PLI scheme is doing well, okay, now those sectors where the PLI scheme has ended, companies which are flying high, their sales have plummeted 40-50%. So what does it mean? So it just basically means at the right price there is a consumption uptick in India. The minute the PLI subsidies are gone and the cost of the product goes up, the consumption falters. And that technically is a worry if you are looking at a consumption-led economy, but I look at it positively because it means a large proportion of the population is unwilling to borrow to meet their consumption. And at the flip side, because you have now been used to set of products which earlier were not available, at the same time, there is a proportion of the population which is happily borrowing and spending, and that is worrying because unlike a consumption economy like the US, our government's balance sheet is not bottomless because the dollar is a international currency, but the rupee has no value beyond the borders.
Would you mean that when you look at this perspective, that as we look at the manufacturing, as I just spoke to you, then how do we, overcome these possibilities with regard to consumption? Because the government has increased the income rate, the slab, and now we are available up to 15 lakhs. We are able to, it's at a questionable point that we are not paying tax. If we are able to provide them with additional, incentive in the form of increased slabs and lowering of taxes, will there be more expenditure, more spending, more consumption by which we'll be able to boost our economy?
Yes, I mean, what this government has shown us since 2014, ever since they came to power, they have been successively every year's budget increasing the exemption limit, reducing taxes, fiddling around with a little bit of exemptions here, there, whatever, and then the new taxation scheme where significantly the taxes have lowered, exemptions were increased, but then all the deductions were removed. But the net of all this is they have put close to 40-50,000 rupees per year in the people's hands to spend. Even the latest GST reduction has reduced costs by almost 300 basis points for a household. So on an annual budget of approximate 6 lakhs, that's another 18-20,000 rupees. So 5,000 rupees per month on an average is the additional consumption that the government has allowed in the people's hands. Now, has the entire amount gone into consumption? I think it's debatable because the uptick in sales at the production level is not so strong. So maybe a portion of it has gone into savings. So net, we still are largely a consumption shy economy. We would like to build our assets and then go and splurge rather than borrow and splurge. At the same time, like I told you, there is a portion of the economy which is borrowing heavily and spending heavily.
Would you
But
mean,
they are still in a significant minority.
would you mean that as a savings increase, when the savings increase, there is no funding available to the banks and other parties. And with the CRR, if the CRR ratio is brought down, because our inflation is not so high, the banks can lend more to the industries which need them at reasonable rates, which will reduce the cost of production and the materials available to the products available to the people. Will that consequently will that be a benefit on the economy?
Okay, now this is quite a complex question because there are a lot of contradictions in the answer in this. Because on one side, uh, savings are not up. The savings are not up, but even if you assume the savings are up, because all banks have shown a 14-15% increase in their deposits, etc., 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 it doesn't normally mean into transmission to credit, because credit demand after the implementation of the IPC has been very watchful by companies because they increasingly are willing to tap equity rather than debt. Secondly, if we say that reducing CRR, etc., increase the liquidity in the banking system and therefore interest rates will come down, again there is a contradiction there because if you see the RBI has been cutting rates recently, but the 10-year bonds are stuck at 6.6%.
Can we continue this a little more later?
Yeah, sure.